Dr. Earle, I am so excited and honored to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, doing fine, and it's great to be on board.
Well, why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself? You have a wide array of credentials and experience. Tell us who you are, what you do, and most importantly for me personally, is how you found yourself so passionate about all things ocean related.
Well, my love of the ocean began at a very early age as a kid on the New Jersey shore, and later in Florida when my parents moved to the Florida Gulf Coast, and my backyard was the ocean. So it was quite natural that I would begin exploring as a child and ask the questions that most kids would be inclined to ask. I mean, about everything: who, what, why, where, when, how. And I've never stopped. And most scientists never do stop asking questions. And the opportunity to dive into the blue heart of the planet, starting at a fairly early age, certainly shaped my my passion for always wanting to go deeper, stay longer, and know more.
Well, we are going to talk about industrial fishing today, but before we do that, I feel like we need to get everybody on the same page with regard to why exactly the ocean is important. And I know in Ocean, a Global Odyssey, you do say that you believe that understanding the importance of the ocean is the first step when we think about taking action to preserve it. So we need to know why it's important if we're going to take some action. So tell us, for the average listener who knows the ocean is really important from an environmental standpoint, but doesn't know why, tell us, why is the ocean so important?
I had this question directed to me by a young reporter in Australia years ago who said, I don't drink salt water. I don't swim. I don't like to eat fish. I get seasick. So why should I care about the ocean? And it occurred to me in a flash, look, okay, so you don't care about the ocean. Suppose it dried up tomorrow, no ocean. Then what? Hmm, we couldn't exist. Earth would be uninhabitable. Life could not exist. Our history of life on Earth is out there, down there. So that's a starting place. No ocean, no life, no blue, no green, no us. But it's not just the existence of salt water in great abundance, it's the living ocean. And it's not just an ocean with life in it, it's after 4.5 billion years of fine tuning, we have a planet that works in our favor owing to the actions, mostly in the ocean, of organisms that have generated the oxygen in the atmosphere, complemented in more recent times by trees and flowers and other green things on the land. But the heavy lifting began and it continues. Photosynthesis in the ocean, generating oxygen, capturing carbon. If you were a smart human being, you wouldn't want to disrupt that system. You'd want to say, my life depends on being able to breathe. My life depends on a favorable climate, the temperature just right for my existence. But we've taken the ocean for granted. Now we know we can't do that anymore. It's the living ocean that shapes climate, weather, maintains planetary chemistry and temperature within a range that is suitable, just right for us. It has taken a very long time for Earth to act on basic rocks and water. I mean, think about 100 million, 200, 500 million years ago, Earth would not be hospitable for us, but it is now. And it's taken us only a few decades to significantly unravel those basic systems, the natural systems, land and sea, that underpin our existence. So when you ask some people why they should care about the ocean, they say, well, delicious, I love seafood, or I love to go sailing, or I love surfing, or I love swimming, or whatever the reasons are, just even the aesthetic appreciation that many have for the joy that they derive from being close to the ocean. But the fact is, the most important thing we take from the ocean is our existence. Full stop. When the ocean is in trouble, and it is, we're in trouble. Phytoplankton in the ocean that generates the oxygen, captures much of the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, creates giant food webs that power fish and whales and shrimp and all the other creatures that we think of as sea creatures, that they have declined, according to recent studies, by about 40% since the middle of the 20th century. That means your life support system is in trouble. 90% of many of the big fish, tunas, sharks, swordfish, even some of the smaller fish, have seriously declined by as much as 90%. For some, like the mako, short-fin mako shark, like the oceanic white-tip shark, like bluefin tuna in the Pacific, fewer than 3% remain from their former abundance in the middle of the 20th century. We're really good at catching, killing, and altering the nature of the ocean.
Well, let's talk about industrial fishing because you say that ending industrial fishing should be our number one priority. So tell me about that.
Well, number one, along with the change from burning fossil fuels to to looking at alternative means of powering civilization, which we do have. We just have to have the guts to make that move, that transition, the courage to really give up things that we have convinced ourselves are necessary, but with the evidence that the real necessity is changing, using technologies that now do exist, but with respect to the destruction of ocean wildlife on an industrial scale. Look, we finally got to the point where we realize clear cutting of forests and burning natural forests has tremendous consequences to climate. Saving forests, you know, letting, embracing forest, planting trees, the Trillion Tree Project is catching the imagination of many to give back, to hold the carbon in the ground, and to maintain the mechanisms that capture carbon and sequester carbon and pass the energy along through food chains to the birds, to the insects, to us. In the ocean, we've neglected where most of the action is with respect to the carbon cycle. And it's in beginning to come in focus. And COP26, for the first time, it was exciting to see blue carbon make headlines, whether whales or large fish, life in the ocean generally. This is the greatest carbon capture and sequestration system on Earth. It's been that way since the beginning of life on Earth, I suppose. But for sure, we can see now clearly that by taking hundreds of millions of tons of ocean wildlife, we're talking whales, sharks, tuna, krill, shrimp, squid, poor squid, octopus, you name it, out of the ocean, that carbon gets released into the atmosphere instead of staying in the ocean. And along with it, the underlying mechanisms that give nutrients back to the phytoplankton and to the seagrass meadows, to the mangroves, to the kelp forests and other benthic algae that are part of our life support system. I don't know why it should not be so difficult to see that our existence really depends on these natural living systems that that make Earth distinctly different from everything else in the universe, and that our existence really depends on respecting nature and doing everything we can while we can to protect what remains of the last wild places on the land and in the ocean, and to restore what we can of what's been lost. We have the best chance that there has ever been in all of history to safeguard this planet so that it's habitable. I mean, yes, we need sound economy. Yes, we need health. Yes, we need security. We need all those things, but none of them are possible without being able to breathe, without having a planet that functions in our favor. And we're not putting that as a priority at this point. We get distracted by more everyday issues, and I understand. I do. I mean, I get distracted myself, but not for long, because I am deeply aware and deeply concerned about what I see happening to Earth as a planetary system suitable for us that is in a state of sharp decline. But I know sharp recovery is possible because I've seen it happen on the land, where you stop the killing and start the caring and really seriously understand how these natural living systems are so connected to us. With every breath we take, every drop of water we drink, we're connected to nature, especially to the ocean, because that's where most of the action takes place.
Well, when we talk about industrial fishing, there are a bunch of things that we should discuss. We should talk about overfishing, which is altering the food web, essentially, right? Overfishing species to the point of extinction. There's the habitat destruction. I should also say I had no idea how fish were actually caught on a grand scale. I had no idea that there was something called um, like blast fishing, where essentially dynamite is tossed into the ocean and then the fish that die come to the top. I had no idea, talking about habitat destruction. I also had no idea that there was a thing called bycatch, which is fish that just happen to be at the wrong place in the wrong time and are killed. And so I'm trying to bring this back to the average listener who may eat seafood, may not, and is likely concerned by this conversation. What can the average listener do?
Well, let me first just look at, at some of those issues you identified. That fishing is very wasteful. If you saw the film Forrest Gump, you might remember the scenes where the shrimp trawler goes over the side, hauls up this mass of life, dumps it on the deck, and they scurry about taking individual shrimp and putting them in a bucket, and then everything else gets shoveled overboard. The ratio of what is killed to what is kept for shrimp fishing and other bottom trawling can be as little as 10% that is killed, 90% kept, but more often it's the other way around. You keep a little bit and you toss the rest of it overboard. Bottom trawling is terribly destructive and terribly wasteful. Not only are you killing most of the creatures that are brought out of the ocean, but you have killed, like clear cutting a forest. You set things back for decades, centuries, millennia. These systems take a long time to assemble, a remarkably short time to destroy. And the level of bottom trolling around the world is staggering. I mean, an assessment has been made that the area that is destroyed every year is the size of a country. So, I mean, a medium, a country like Germany, that we're just the places that are accessible get trawled and trawled and trawled over and over again. So the likelihood that they will ever have a chance of being restored are slim to none. So one of the greatest efforts or actions that can be taken is to simply eliminate bottom trawling as a means of taking. But we need to go beyond that. Consider, you should want to know, everybody, who is it? What is it that I'm eating? What am I putting into my system, my personal life support system? I mean, we should be asking that question, whether it's a vegetable or an animal. What is this? Where did it come from? How old is it? What's in it that I either want to be a part of me or that I'd rather not have this as a part of me?
Speaking for the seafood eaters, what I would think they would say, as you know, they're listening to our conversation, is that um, seafood is the last truly wild food, perhaps. But I think you would argue that it's that when we're blast fishing and using sonar and radar, it's not all that. I mean, we're using our oversized intellect, and so then it's not sustainable.
No, no. We're mining the ocean of life, and it's not recovering as fast as we are taking it. And you might hear otherwise, that you look for labels that say sustainable eat fish. Well, I ask you to look at the evidence. What's sustainable? To go from 90 to lose 90% since the middle of the 20th century and continuing. I mean, if you level off at 10% of what existed a few decades ago, that's not that's not really sustainable. You manage to keep it at a low level, but a healthy ocean isn't one that just ticks along, barely turning things over. A healthy ocean is an ocean that is not in a state of decline, and we are continuing to see the nutrient cycles dismembered along as we take these large quantities and large segments, especially the large predators, out of the ocean. We are just disrupting a system that is highly connected, everything connecting to everything else. So you take the tunas, the swordfish, the sharks out of the system, you've broken critical links in the nutrient cycles that a healthy ocean has developed over a very long period of time. And trying to do what we can to restore that is one of our major challenges. And we also have to ask the question, to what extent do we really need to consume ocean wildlife as compared to a choice? Because you've learned to savor the taste of a tuna fish sandwich, or or bluefin tuna as sushi or sashimi, something that certainly did not exist on my menu as a child. I mean, in Japan perhaps, but not globally. And if we've learned to consume a lot of things that didn't exist on our menus until late in the 20th century and now into the 21st. So if we learned to like them, maybe we can learn to avoid them going forward, because we prefer a healthy ocean. And there are plenty of other things that can power us. Uh, Going back to the idea that eat your veggies, They're good for you. I heard that as a kid, to me it was great. We had a big garden, and most of what we consumed on our little farm in New Jersey, we grew. We didn't grow cows, but we did have chickens, and we did have ducks and sometimes turkeys. But modern civilization has led us to industrial farming that has a lot of problems that we are beginning to address about water consumption, land consumption, inefficient distribution of the food that we actually grow. That there's plenty of evidence that if we could improve food waste, be more efficient about what we how we use the food that we do grow, we could still eat well and not face this terrible food security issue that now looms in front of us by and to consider to what extent is our ocean creatures a part of food security. You hear that I do at least, that we must continue to commercially extract ocean wildlife because so many people on the planet either depend on it for their protein or their animal protein or for their primary source of this or that. But I just ask you to look at the evidence. How much of this is choice and how much of this is need? And I I suggest that there are coastal communities and island countries that truly are largely dependent on ocean life as a source of sustenance. But overall, the wildlife that is extracted from the ocean, even by coastal communities and island countries, is not directly consumed for sustenance, but is turned into money. We're talking about livelihoods, not not food security directly. So tuna are too valuable to consume locally. They reach the international marketplace that goes across the planet. And I, I think we need to rethink using fish as money or squid or any of the other creatures that we take from the ocean and rather think of them as this is wildlife trade that we've stopped largely, at least, killing wild birds. Songbirds are protected for a whole host of reasons. None, not the least of them, we just think they're beautiful and they enrich our lives aesthetically, as well as all the other ecological and important values for maintaining a world that works in our favor. But in the ocean, we don't think of fish as wildlife. We think of them as, delicious. Or it's fun to go out and kill something. The killing of these beautiful animals for sport. That it's a little um, it's learned behavior and learned appetites that once you see and know and understand, there's a chance you might think differently. And the importance of wildlife in the ocean, maintaining the integrity of the living ocean. Right now, restoration is critically important when you look at the big holes that have been left in the ecosystems in the ocean because of taking hundreds. I mean, just try to wrap your mind around hundreds of millions of tons of squid, of sharks, of tunas. Just these amazing, the scale of what we're extracting out of the ocean every year. It has to have consequences, and it does have consequences on ocean chemistry, on the carbon cycle, on the nutrient cycle, on powering phytoplankton that generates the oxygen, captures the carbon, maintains the integrity of systems upon which we are wholly and utterly dependent for our existence.
Well, your answer there really brings us full circle to something that you said at the beginning of our conversation was which was that as human beings we have the power to annihilate, but we also in our toolbox have the power of restraint. Dr. Earle, where can my listeners learn more about you and your work, and where can they find Ocean, a Global Odyssey?
Well, you can check out National Geographic, of course, where I am um, explorer at large, and Mission Blue, the organization that I started some years ago to identify critical areas in the ocean, like critical places on the land, to be embraced with care, joining with many other organizations that are now aiming to embrace at least 30% of the land and sea in the next 10 years with enhanced care, and as much as half of the world, half of our life support system at least, by 2050. So the book, Ocean, National Geographic Ocean, A Global Odyssey, it's available, I hope, in bookstores around the country and around the world, but you can certainly find it on the internet where books are sold. And I would be so pleased to take you on that journey, dive into the ocean, as I have tried to do in that book. It represents not just my lifetime of trying to understand the ocean, but it really takes into account and profiles dozens of other ocean minded people, tell their stories, and to try to distill knowledge as we now have it in the 21st century about why the ocean matters to everyone, everywhere, all of the time. And that includes you, whoever you are.
I just need to say about Ocean, a Global Odyssey, what a book, right? There's the amazing photos that we all come to love and expect from National Geographic, but there's also every single piece of information about the ocean that we would ever possibly want to know. I mean, how comprehensive is this book? It is the perfect coffee table book. I loved the hope spots that you put in. They just left, I mean, it can get heavy reading about, all these environmental issues as they pertain to the ocean, but the hope spots really spoke to me. So I just want to thank you so much for putting this research out into the world for people who know nothing about the ocean, such as myself. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Dr. Earle. I enjoyed every second of our conversation.
Well, one thing that I hope people will take away from Ocean, a Global Odyssey is a keen desire that they won't resist diving into the ocean themselves. Go check it out.